This week's Torah portion is Terumah, which means offerings. So Terumah in a nutshell. The people of Israel received the Torah at Sinai, and now they're going to build the mini tabernacle, the mini Beis Hamikdash in the desert called the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And God gives very specific instructions. And God says to Moshe, tell the Jewish people, V'asali migdash v'shachanti b'socham. Make me a sanctuary and I will dwell among them. And the classic question that I've mentioned before, but I'll reiterate, does anybody remember? There was one sanctuary, there was one Beis Hamikdash, there was one Mishkan. Why does God say, make me a dwelling, a sanctuary, and I will dwell within them? Does anybody recall what we discussed? And the answer is, for example, now we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. We're waiting for the third Beis Hamikdash when Mashiach comes. What God is telling the Jewish people, make me a sanctuary and I would dwell within them, means each and every one of us has to make ourselves a dwelling place for God, a home for God in our lives. That's why when you say, where's God? Where you are, that's where God is. Wherever you make room for God, that's where God is found. If we recall the story with the burning bush, remember the story with the burning bush that didn't burn? Moses is going out he's shepherding his father-in-law's flock. This is before the exodus of Egypt. And one of the little sheep disappears. And he goes to find this little sheep. He finds it and he sees a bush that's on fire, but it's not being consumed by fire. Normally a bush burns 1, 2, 3, it's gone. So he gets closer, and as he gets closer, he hears a voice, the voice of God. And the God says, don't come any closer because the ground on which you're standing is holy. But isn't the bush the holy part? That's where God, good morning, Devorah. Good morning, Debbie. Isn't the bush where God is kind of presence there? Isn't the bush the holy part? Why does God say to Moshe, don't come any closer, take off your shoes, the ground on which you're standing is holy?
Oh, don't you get the petite?
And the answer is, God is found where you are. You don't have to go find the burning bush. Wherever you're standing is where you're meant to be, and that place is holy because God put you there. Because many times we look at our lives and go, I wasn't meant to be here. I really should have been there. If I would have done that, I could have been that. And we're always chasing
Yes, it is. Yes.
a higher place, a better place, a place where we think we should be. And God is saying to Moshe and to all of us, this earth upon which you're standing is holy. You know why? Because I put you there.
Love you, kiddo.
So Vasali Mikdash V'Shachanti B'Seicham, God is saying, each and every one of us has to make a sanctuary for God within ourselves, bringing godliness into our lives, connecting to our godly soul. So even when we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, even when the Jews were exiled and didn't have a sanctuary, like nowadays, every person has to be a sanctuary for godliness for Almighty God. This is what the Torah portion starts with. And it's very interesting. The Torah portion describes also everything they have to build. But I want to share something with you, that there's more details about building the sanctuary than there is about the creation of the world. The creation of the world, how many passages? 31 verses. Building the sanctuary, 371 verses to describe every detail. Now that seems strange. Creation of the world is so complex. And yet there's only 31 verses in the Torah. The building of the sanctuary, over 300 passages. Why? And we know, as we discussed so many times, that the 5 books of the Torah scroll, is concise. It's smaller than Harry Potter's book or Herman Wouk, Winds of War. Remember Herman Wouk, Winds of War?
Yes,
Or
yes.
my Bubba's dictionary. Of course, we have the oral tradition. So if it's so concise, you would say, describe the tabernacle in shorter detail. But 371 verses. Why? Because this is the blueprint of our lives.
Ah,
Everything that was put into the sanctuary is also something everyone puts in themselves. Every vessel, every brick, well, it wasn't bricks, every bracket, so to speak, is really a lesson about how we live our lives. I don't have time to do all of them today, but we're going to do a little bit. Also, you look at the vessels that were put into the sanctuary. This teaches us Jewish feng shui. I don't know if I pronounced that right. How
yeah.
to create a spiritual, godly environment in your home. Jewish feng shui, we'll do a little bit of it because it is interesting. And we learn it from the vessels and the articles where they were placed in the Beis Hamikdash and in the tabernacle and the sanctuary. Does anybody have any questions so far? So before I go into the individual vessels and so on, I want to share something very beautiful, that many parts of the tabernacle were built with cedar wood. Cedar wood. And the question the commentaries ask, where did they get cedar wood in the desert? It's not exactly something that
Ah,
grows in the desert. Does anybody know where they got the wood? Guess what? They
from the
brought it.
Nile.
What did you say? Repeat that.
From the river. I don't know.
Good.
I
From the
don't know.
river where? Egypt.
Egypt. I was going to say the
Egypt.
Nile. I was
Yeah,
afraid to
very, very
say it.
good. So Rashi asks this question: how do the children of Israel, I'm quoting Rashi, have cedar wood in the desert? Rabbi Tanchum explains, when Yaakov foresaw the prophecy that Israel, the Jewish people, were destined to build a sanctuary in the desert, and when he came down from Egypt, from Israel to live in Egypt, remember when he's reunited with his son Joseph, he planted them there, and he told his children, when you leave Egypt, take the cedar trees with you. This is what
Oh,
Rashi says.
wow.
But listen, isn't this a little extreme? He schlepped trees from Israel, planted them in Egypt, and did he expect the Jews, his children, many generations later, to schlep the wood with them? When you're running away from a country, I'm not
No,
exactly.
us
Go ahead.
Jews like to schlep a lot of things with us.
Very good. We're schleppers.
We are.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Constant, constant.
There was a joke about my father always, that not a attaché case, not a beautiful leather attaché case. Whenever my father would travel or even go for a short car ride, he had a plastic shopping bag from the grocery and he would
Love it.
fill it with all kinds of reading material. And we would ask him, what are you schlepping a plastic bag? First of all, it looks very shabby. You look homeless. Second of all, I need to read. I need to read. So the
Ah,
joke with my father was he always had a plastic bag with reading material wherever he went. He went to the doctor's office. He went to a gala dinner. He brought it along. You never know. Might be boring. He'll read something. So
I
that was the
love
joke about my
that.
father. So maybe, yeah, we Jews, we're always traveling. We're always the wandering Jews. So we're always carrying things. We're experts.
Love it.
So
And Miriam brought the tambourine,
brilliant.
not
Yes,
for the
very good.
music, to be
Yes,
joyful.
yes. Even though, like we said, when you're escaping a country, you're not exactly packing your musical instruments. You pack your silverware, you pack your jewelry, you pack your designer bags, but the tambourine, bus epis. But there's much more to the story of the cedar trees, which I want to share with you. When the Jews were enslaved many years later after Joseph died and his father died, and the Paro came and he made the Jews his slaves. It seemed so hopeless. Life was so hopeless. It's like the Jews that were in the concentration camps or the hostages in the tunnels. It's so hopeless. Will there ever be a time when I will be free? Will I be able to see the sky, the blue sky, and walk in the garden and not be hindered by oppression and slavery and pain and suffering? So when Jacob planted those trees, they weren't just there because, hey, it's practical, guys. It's also cheaper. We have our own trees. We don't have to buy. Jews were always very practical. It was a sign of hope. The fact that they could look at the cedar trees and say to their children, there was a promise by our forefathers that one day we will leave here and go to the land of Israel, our inheritance. So the cedar tree was not only a practical addition. Guys, one day when you build your mansion in Israel, you'll have cedar trees. It was a sign of hope for the families, for the Jews, the Israelites living in Egypt. When they looked at the cedar trees, it was a sign of feeling, you know what? There is a prophecy, and one day we will be free, and we will take those cedar trees and build our Mishkan, our tabernacle for Almighty God. So the cedar trees were a sign of hope for the Jewish nation. Now, many years later, the Lubavitcher Rebbe asks the question, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, but now we're in exile so many years. So, you could look at your life, really, it's wonderful, it's great, but you know what? The past few years, I'm not looking at it that way anymore. Since October 7th, the world has become really a crazy place. What can we look at now? Where are our cedar trees that we can look at and say, you know what? God promised us that Mashiach will come, the redemption will come. And forget the lingo, because some people are uncomfortable with the lingo. Mashiach, it sounds so Christian. The second coming, it's not the second coming. But think of a world where there's no war, there's peace, there's love, there's harmony, there's healing, there's no illness, there's no dying and suffering. If you don't like the word Mashiach, if you feel uncomfortable with the word redemption, think of happiness, peace, a Garden of Eden. Think of serenity. That's how you can view it. If you don't want to use those words, don't use those words.
Okay.
What gives us hope? So there's a beautiful passage that says that a tzaddik, a righteous person, it says, tzaddik hatama yifrach pe'erez balvanan yizgeh. Says in the Psalms. The Psalms are so poetic, by the way. It says that tzaddik shall bloom as a palm tree, as a cedar of Lebanon, he shall flourish. So nowadays, when we had the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was physically alive, the tzaddik, the righteous of our generation, are our hope. Why? Because what does a tzaddik do? What does a Jewish leader do, a spiritual leader do? He or she gives hope to their people. They become the cedar trees. They remind us that life is not meant to be dark, that there is going to be a time of peace and rebuilding of the third Beis HaMikdash. So just like the cedar trees in Egypt were a reminder of the prophecy that the Jews would leave Egypt and build a sanctuary, nowadays our tzaddikim, our righteous individuals, are our cedar trees because they give us hope, encourage us to do more, bring more light into the world, add more mitzvahs in our lives, connect to godliness, connect to your godly soul. So nowadays, who are our cedar trees? The righteous among us. So each and every one of us, I think to myself, has to be the cedar tree. We have to uplift each other and remind each other that God is with us, and we will see Mashiach. We will see the rebuilding of the third temple. We will see the ingathering of the exiles. And as strange and as remote does it sound, think of a Jew who's a hostage in the tunnel. Did he or she ever think they would get out? They even say they never thought they would get out. They
Mm.
never thought they would get out. And going back in time, did we ever think we would get out of Egypt? No, over 200 years we're oppressed. You think we're going to ever be free? So we have to look and realize, yes, because we have a promise from Almighty God. That's what we hold on to. So I look at this and I say to myself, I have to be a cedar tree. We have to be for each a pillar of support. A pillar of support. So that's how I look at this lesson for our days, for our times. So who here feels they could be a cedar tree? You're all
I
very
do.
humble. Diane, for sure, no?
I'm not humble. I'm the
Okay,
only one.
I tell you, I
No,
look at
we
all of
have
you
to
and
be for our
each one of
children.
you, I think can be that pillar of support for others. So don't be too humble. Don't let humility hold you back from being a pillar of support.
But
Because
for
in
our
every
grandchildren, we have to. We have
yeah,
to
it's
be.
very good, even for just the grandchildren, even for our immediate family. Because Isha Bon Sabesha, the women are the foundation and of the building of the home. That's who we are. Think of the women who left Egypt with the tambourines. This is us now. We may not be holding tambourines, we're holding other things. That's who we are. We are the cedar trees. So does anybody want to add anything, say anything, share anything? So let me ask you now a few questions. Let's have a little participation. Who can share objects or vessels that were in the Holy Temple? And then we can analyze a little bit about each of these vessels. Who can think of things that were built in the Holy Temple? Anybody want to share? Think of anything that you remember was in the Holy Temple.
With their mirrors and
You're on the
something.
right track. What did they do with the copper mirrors? Very good. What did they do?
I don't know what they did with them.
Where did they get the copper mirrors, Jane? Remind everybody.
I think the women had the mirrors.
Very good. And what did they do with those mirrors?
I can't remember what they did with them though.
Who remembers? They took the mirrors, they melted them down, and they made it into the sinks of the Beis Hamikdash. I remember the story where when the women brought the copper mirrors, Moshe didn't want to take it. He says, mirrors is vanity. The sanctuary is not a place of vanity, it's a place of humility. You're in God's presence. So Almighty God said, no, 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 you have it all wrong. These mirrors is what got you here. When the women beautified themselves in Egypt with these mirrors, and they went to their husbands, and the husbands saw their beauty, they couldn't resist them, and they had intimacy, and they gave birth to the children. Because Paro didn't want Jewish children to be born. They went against the decree of Paro, and they had more and more children. These mirrors beautified the relationships between husband and wife to bring a generation that would leave Egypt. So God said, these mirrors are precious to me. The women defied the edicts of Paro, and they gave birth to children in spite of the harshness and hardships and misery. So Moshe melted them down, and they became the sinks of purity in the sanctuary and later on in the Beis Hamikdash. So that's beautiful, Jane. Thank you for bringing that up. The sinks. What other vessels were there that they built in the temple and in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, which was the traveling mini temple?
An eternal light?
Sorry, you didn't hear that?
Diane, an eternal light? I don't know.
So what gave light? You're on the right track. Hanukkah, what do we light?
Candles.
Oh,
Oil.
Oil and what?
Oil.
Oil and what?
Oil.
Lamps? I don't know.
Think of Hanukkah. What did they light every single day in the
The
Beis
menorah.
Menorah, excellent.
Hanukkah.
Very good. So the light, the menorah, there was a menorah in the sanctuary, and it was 7 branches, not 8 like Hanukkah. because one for every day of the week, symbolic. So there's a menorah. Okay, what else? We have sinks, we have a menorah. What else do we need? What was in the holies of holies, the inner chamber? Who remembers? Something very, very precious.
Sandy said incense.
Okay, we're very good. So they had the katoras. That was one of the offerings. Very good. As a matter of fact, I mentioned in my lecture on Thursday night that the Rebbe's wife's name was Chaya Mushka. Chaya means life. Mushka comes from musk, incense. In the Beis Hamikdash, there was 11 ingredients of incense that they burnt every day. And mushka, musya, was one of those 11 spices, so to speak, of incense that they burned every day.
But they don't do that anymore in the shuls or anywhere Jewish.
Correct. Why? We do not bring offerings on an altar. We do not burn the ketoret incense because we don't have the Beis Hamikdash. So it's forbidden for you, for example, to put up in your backyard the altar and a ketoris and decide now you have a little Beis Hamikdash, you're going to burn it. By the way, you're allowed to burn incense in your house to have a nice smell, or if you want to have meditation, whatever, Jewish meditation. But we're talking about the katoris of the Holy Temple. You do not practice the actions and the mitzvahs of the Beis Hamikdash unless there's a Beis Hamikdash. So example, even though your husband or your brother or your father is a Kohen or a Levi, they don't suddenly put on the garments of the Levi or the garments of the Kohen and they declare they're now going to be doing the services of the temple. Only when we have the real Beis Hamikdash are those services done and it's appropriate to do it. That's the law. When you don't have a Beis Hamikdash, so the sages said, "V'neshalma parms fasenu." When used in the olden days, a woman gave birth, a healthy baby, she would bring an offering to the Beis Hamikdash to thank God. Person committed a crime or a sin, they atoned by bringing a certain type of offering. Holidays, offerings were brought, and so on. But now, how do we replace offerings? We pray. And if you read the prayers, you'll notice it references the offerings of the temple. Say, and on Monday, they brought 2 sheep. And on Thursday, they brought 1 goat. It'll reference the offerings brought to the Beis Hamikdash that they put on the next thing that was built, the altar. It's called the Mizbeach, the altar. Think of a barbecue pit. So we have the menorah, we have the sinks, we have the altar. Now what else do we have? Something very pivotal. I'll give a hint. What happened to the broken tablets? What happened to the whole tablets, the luchos? What did they do with them? Who knows? They put them where?
An encasement.
Set very good. In a case called the ark. The ark. So they had a box called the ark. They put in the broken luchos and they put in the whole luchos into this ark. And it was kept in the holies of holies. And the ark was made of 3 boxes. An outer box that was pure gold, an inner box that was I don't know how to pronounce it, ACAI wood, Ashea wood?
Asai?
Acai wood.
Acai.
Wood, very good. And the inner box was gold. So we have outer gold, inside wood, and the third box, like a puzzle, 3 boxes, was gold. And what was on top of the ark? Something very fascinating. Have you ever heard of the cherubim?
The angels?
The 2 angels, very good. 2 cherubim, they were called, with wings.
Didn't they
And if
look
you
at
look-
each other when things were good and looked away from each other when things were not good or something?
Excellent. Very good. Very
Wow.
good. Exactly. So on top of the ark were the cherubim, angelic faces of children, one a boy, one a girl, with wings. And when, as Jane mentioned, Jane, say it again so everyone can hear.
When they were happy, I think when they were happy with us as a people, or in general, they looked at each other. And when things were not going well, when they looked away from each
Yep.
other.
So it was a miracle. The cherubim,
Hmm.
which was like two angelic faces of children with wings,
Fascinating.
molded out of gold. So when God was on good terms with the Jewish people, we followed the mitzvahs in the land of Israel. We did good. We
Mommy.
were on the right path. They would face each other. When at times there was an estrangement from God, Jews worshipped idolatry, where they committed certain very terrible sins, the cherubim turned away from each other. It was miraculous. So at
Interesting.
any given time, the high priest could look into the inner chamber, because remember, he was the only one permitted in there, and once a year, Yom Kippur, and see what's going on with our people, what's going on with our relationship. Now imagine you had the cherubim in your house. When you're on good terms with your husband, the cherubim are looking at each other. When you're on not good terms with your husband or wife, they're looking apart. Think about it. Think of this
That's
if you had,
hysterical.
who wouldn't want to have that in their house?
I love that.
Now I want to tell you something very, very fascinating about the cherubim. Give me 1 second. So there's a very, very fascinating insight with the cherubim. That, by the way, that modern culture has adopted cherubim as angelic children's faces. You'll see that term in many, many places. The cherubim, the cute little pudgy faces of the babies are called cherubim, you know? So it's a very interesting thing how from the Torah that this was adopted. So Moses conversed with God through the kruvim. They were called kruvim in Hebrew. So he would go there and God would speak to him through the kruvim. And like we said, when God was estranged from the Jewish people, they would turn away from each other. So give me a second to collect my thoughts. I can get myself together here. Let me just put on my glasses so I could read. So in this discussion about kruvim, we find out how to educate our children, how to educate your children. How do you educate your children that they should be loyal, faithful, kind, generous, mention? How come some children grow up to be obnoxious, arrogant, self-centered? Why do some families have children that are giving and kind and loving? And some families look at the children, they couldn't do a favor if you begged them. All they see is themselves. So what's your opinion? Why do some families have children that are raised menschlichkeit and they grow up to be menschlichkeit and some don't? What's your opinion on this matter? Let's hear from the mothers.
Well, a lot of it has to do with upbringing, but it also has to do with their environment and luck, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, mazel is very important. Yeah. You know, sometimes you have to say the parents do everything right, then it just doesn't happen. So you can't blame yourself for everything. You try your best. At the end of the day, you know, even rabbis have spoken about their children who are not following the mitzvahs anymore. They're not Torah observant. They don't keep kosher and kosher. They said, I did everything right, but it didn't happen. And then there's a point where you really can't blame yourself for every single thing. There's a God. So you can't be you can be hard on yourself, but sometimes it's out of your control. It's not anything you did. That's just how it is sometimes. So let me share an interesting insight that when it talks about the cherubim, the kruvim in the Beis HaMikdash, you have one other time where it talks about it. And that is when Adam and Chava eat from the tree of knowledge. And let me read from the Torah, Bereshis, Genesis. So what happens when they eat from the tree of knowledge? God says you can no longer live in the Garden of Eden. You've lost your chance to be in paradise. You went against my will. You ate from the tree of knowledge, and now you have to Go out into the world and make your way. You're no longer going to be taken care of hand and foot. And it says in the Torah, and God drove man out, man and woman. And what did he do to prevent them from coming back in? He stationed from the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim, the keruvim, and a blade of a revolving sword to guard the way so they couldn't get back in. So in one case, in the Beis HaMikdash, it's angels of love, cherubim, keruvim of love. Here, it seems like they're keruvim, angels of destruction in a sense. You dare try to get back into the Garden of Eden, woe to you, because that sword is going to get you. So which one is it? Why use keruvim if they're supposed to be childish, angelic? So here the Torah is giving us a recipe to educating our children. Why did Adam and Chava eat from the tree of good knowledge? So there's a whole story with the snake. The snake said, God is trying to prevent you from having wisdom, and the whole story with that. So Chava and Adam decided to go against the will of the Eibishter, even though everything was provided for them, hand and foot. And this is the key in educating our children. You have to teach your children that the world doesn't spin around them. Selfishness, being self-absorbed. You have to teach your children to be giving, to be tolerant of others, to not to have constant expectations. What's in it for me? What can I get? There has to be a give and a take. Children have to be given responsibilities, even if you have a full-time maid and housekeeper, and taught to give tzedakah, and taught to share. I remember one of my friends told me she always packs 2 chocolate bars. I'm like, why? One for him and one he is to give to a friend. And I'm like, wow, that's such a beautiful idea.
Oh, I love that.
I know, me too. When I heard it, I'm like, I want to do that every day. But I was packing 11 lunches. It got a little bit, busy. So the Torah is describing using cherubim. Children can be educated to listen, to be giving, to be accepting, to be tolerant, or children can be self-centered, self-absorbed. What's in it for me? Why should I share? What did he do for me? He didn't do anything for me. Why should I give him anything? Why should I be honest? No one else is honest. Everyone else cheats. So the Torah is showing us, do you want your children to grow up to be reflective of the angelic keruvim that, like in the Beis HaMikdash, like on the Ark? Or are you going to have children that are reflective of angels of destruction? They have nothing to contribute to society. They're self-absorbed. And they grow up to be that way as adults. It's the people that never can say a nice word. They don't know how to give a compliment. They don't know how to share. They don't know how to give. What's in it for me? It's the way you raise your children. When Adam and Chava, who had everything, they lived in a mansion. Everything the maid provided for them. And the one thing God, their father, told them not to eat from the tree of knowledge. Don't go into my study. Don't touch that. They couldn't follow. They couldn't listen. And they lost it all. So when you have everything in your life and you don't appreciate it, that's when you turn into someone who's has to be tossed out of the Garden of Eden, so to speak. You lose everything. So that's a difference in how you raise your children. You raise your children to be entitled, or you raise your children to be giving, accepting, kind, even if you come from a home, thank God, that has everything and anything you want. Does anybody want to add anything about that?
Well,
Perfect.
And now I want to share one.
it's,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
no, it's just I'm processing what I want to share. It's okay.
You, you know what?
There,
Just share whenever you're ready. Interrupt and share. It's not interrupting.
it's
Jump
just
in when you're ready to share.
sometimes circumstances create a way to show tolerance. Like I have a special needs daughter, and I didn't want that, but that's what I got, and she's amazing, and my kids are very tolerant. Even just circle of friends, it teaches people to be more tolerant of differences, and I don't know. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's absolutely,
Nice.
that's precious, Diane. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I look at Taka sometimes, I see how come some teenagers or adults are so tolerant and loving and kind to everyone that they meet. And others are like, why is your kid making so much noise? Why can't you be quiet? Why don't you respect the rest of us? They don't even think maybe that family's going through a hard time.
Mhm.
Maybe that child is having a meltdown for whatever reason. So I wonder sometimes how to become more, how do we teach our children to be more tolerant and accepting, not be so intolerant, you know?
Mhm. Yep.
So I think also very important that children emulate what they see at home. Like if you break a dish and then you curse, your children realize, hey, when you break a dish, that's what you do. When you break a dish, you say Mazel Tov, like under the chuppah. So
I
children
love it.
emulate what they see at home.
Yeah.
If every time someone knocks on your door and asks you for tzedakah, it won't happen here, but in New York, Brooklyn, every day, and you say, "Stop knocking on my door," or let's say you're not wealthy, you give 50 cents, you give $1, you give a quarter, and your children see you give, then when someone knocks on their door, they'll give. So also children emulate what they see. I think it's very important, that there's a role model for them, that they see there's something called compassion and kindness, even if it's difficult at times to be kind and compassionate.
Yeah. Yeah.
The story of the high school teacher. Excuse me if I've told you this joke before. He's teaching his class American history. He poses a question. Who said this and when? Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you could do for your country. Who said it? Does anybody remember?
Well, sure.
Go
John
ahead.
F. Kennedy. John
At,
F. Kennedy.
at his inauguration, right?
Right.
And none of the students, high school students, answer. And the
Wow.
history teacher is appalled. Finally, in the front row, there's a Japanese exchange student. He raises his hand. The teacher calls on him, and he says it was John Fitzgerald Kennedy at his inauguration in 1960, whatever. And the teacher said, that is correct. And he begins to berate the class. You're all American citizens. You don't know this famous statement? Where's our education? Our education is going to pot. We have the worst educational system. Now, the Japanese, they know how to educate their kids. They know what they're doing. And he's ranting and raving, and one student in the back calls out, the hell with the Japanese. And now the teacher is really irate. Who said that? And a student pipes up, Harry Truman, 1945.
It's great.
But nowadays, the kids say, what's in it for me? You have to say, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? Remember the story I told you with the Lubavitcher Rebbe? There was a woman who wrote to the Rebbe that people don't like her. She's not popular. So the Rebbe writes her, when you're at an event or a party, offer to pour people a drink of water, drink whatever's on the table, seltzer. Okay. Remember, the Rebbe didn't tell her to say more psalms. So she's at a party and she's sitting near some women and she says, can I pour you a drink? And they say, oh, yeah, very nice. And she does this every single time. And lo and behold, she becomes more well-liked. People gravitate to her. People want to talk to her. So the Rebbe gave her very practical advice. If you feel you're not getting, give. It's
Yeah.
counterintuitive. But don't become more stingy. Become more giving. And then, kamayim elpanim, the water will reflect what reflection of who you are. Like a mirror. If you have a red forehead, the mirror is not going to show you a pale forehead. What you give in is what you get out. You can't expect your reflection to change if that's what your reflection is. Whatever's in the mirror will reflect who you are. But if you change your behavior and you put on a little foundation over your red forehead, that's people will see you with a smooth forehead, correct? So whatever you put in is what will reflect to others. So if you want kindness, you have to show kindness. If you want to be liked, you have to act likable in a sense. So going back to this is education. Education, the Keruvim can be beautiful, angelic, kind, and then you can have Keruvim that stand at the Garden of Eden with swords, preventing you from coming back into the beautiful paradise. So the Keruvim can be whatever we put into them. That's the concept of education. There's another beautiful Hasidic insight that I want to share. That when the Romans came to destroy the Holy Temple, they came into the Kodesh Kodashim, the holies of holies, and they saw the Keruvim. Remember, in a tight embrace, and they grabbed the Keruvim off the ark, and they paraded it through the streets, and they said, "Look what the Jews think about all day: intimacy, promiscuity. Look at this. They have two children embracing. This is the Jews." And what's the story? If God was destroying the temple and the Jews were now being sent into exile by the Romans, why would the Keruvim be facing each other in an embrace? Shouldn't they have been facing away from each other? God is estranged from the Jewish people. They committed idolatry. They did terrible things, and that's why God destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. There was baseless hate among the Jews. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. So why are the Keruvim in an embrace at this very horrific time? Does anybody have any insight? Why would they be in an embrace? It should be turned away from each other like we discussed, because the Keruvim reflected the relationship between God and the Jewish people. It's a Kabbalistic insight, so it's a little deeper, perhaps. Not perhaps it is. So Hasidus, Jewish mysticism, explains something I find so powerful that, and I'll share a story first to explain it, then I'll explain it. There was a husband and wife, and they weren't getting along. So they decide they're going to get a divorce. So they go to the Rav, the rabbi of the city, and the rabbi of the city says, "No, you can't get a divorce. You're not a couple that should get divorced." They come back again to the rabbi. Please, we want a divorce. We don't like each other. We don't get along. The rabbi says, "Okay, I'll give you a divorce, provided that just like you got together, you got married with a huge banquet, a huge wedding, you will have to have a similar huge banquet for the divorce. Big party." Good. All right, we're willing to do that. So in their beautiful home, they were a wealthy couple. They made a beautiful banquet to celebrate their upcoming divorce. And before the wife was going back to her father's home, as was the custom in those days, her husband, who was already inebriated, says to her, "Take whatever you want. take the most precious thing from our home. I give you permission to take it back to your father's house. Okay. And he's all drunk. He goes to sleep. She calls her father's servants and she points to her husband on the bed, sleeping, and she tells them, please bring him to my father's house where I'm going. And he wakes up in the morning and he's like, where am I? And he realizes he's in his father-in-law's house. So he comes out of the bedroom and he sees his wife, soon to be ex. He says, why am I here? Well, what's going on? I know I was drunk. She said, do you remember yesterday you told me at the party, at the banquet, that I should take the most valuable thing to me back to my father's house. And I realized at that moment that you are the most valuable thing in my life. So I took you back to my home. And when he heard that, it broke down some barriers. And he realized that deep down he loved his wife dearly. And the Rabbi Akiva, was a smart man, a smart leader. The famous Rabbi Akiva knew exactly what he was doing when he told them to make a party. And they remained happily married. Sometimes in life, it's too perfect. And sometimes it is darkness and a breakage in the relationship that makes us realize the deepest buried feelings that we truly have. When the Jews, during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, went against the will of God, began worshiping idolatry, began fighting with each other and killing each other, God decided, I must destroy the Beis Hamikdash. I cannot rest in this environment anymore. And God allowed the Romans to come, and they burnt the Beis Hamikdash. But the Kruvim, the relationship between the Jewish people and God, became so strong and deep. Because sometimes in the greatest darkness, we find our true love, our true faith, our true connection. So yes, the Beis Hamikdash was burning and it had to burn.
Right. Okay.
It couldn't stand anymore in the environment that it was.
When it starts to like lose.
Ladies, do you want to mute?
And you do the glaze. She doesn't pull color all the way through. She's supposed to.
Ladies, you want to mute yourselves? Okay. So in the deepest darkness, the Beis Hamikdash had to be destroyed. It could not stand in the environment of hate, Jewish hate. But the relationship with God became stronger and deeper and emerged because the Jews realized what they lost now. And God was telling you, Jewish nation, you're going into exile. You're going into Gullus. You're going to have to leave the land of Israel now. But me and you and I, we're tight. I will never leave you. So darkness hurts. Darkness is painful. But from darkness, a little glimmer of light is so powerful. So when the cherubim were embracing as the Beis Hamikdash burnt, God was showing us a deeper dimension in our relationship. You don't want to get to that point. It's horrible to get to that point. But once you get to that point, God is showing us, I'm never leaving you. It will just be in a deeper level. It won't be an external relationship where everybody sees us holding hands, so to speak. So that's what happened. The cherubim embraced to reflect that the love that God has for us and we have for God is there, albeit in a different way, in a deeper way, and maybe even a more powerful way. Because when do we seek God? When it's dark, unfortunately. When do you seek light? When do you put on your flashlight? When it's dark. When it's light in the house, you don't think, oh my gosh, there might be darkness. You don't think about it. But when it's dark is when you seek out the light. So the cherubim embraced It was a reflection of our new relationship, new dimension of a relationship with Almighty God. This is what the Kabbalah explains about the Kruvim, the cherubim. Does anybody want to say anything or add anything? So I'm now going to share a little bit about how we see the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash in our own homes, because I think that's a very relevant application, things that we can institute if we don't already have it. So we discussed that there is the ark, the menorah, then there was, we called the shulchan. Who knows what was on the table in the Holy Temple and in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle? It's something we bake every Friday.
Challah.
Challah. There were 12 loaves of freshly baked challah on the table in the Beis HaMikdash, one for every one of the 12 tribes. Beautiful challah. Okay, so we have the menorah, we have the ark, we have the shulchan, we have the altar, we have the kior, the sink, and we have the kruvim, which are our children, of course. Now, the ark, like I said, had 3 boxes. Gold deep inside, middle box wood, outer box gold. And Kabbalah explains it is a reflection of our psyche. I call it the id, the yid, and the superego. So the gold innermost box represents our godly soul, untouchable, no matter what happens, no matter how deep it gets buried. That gold can never be touched, can never be harmed, can never be burnt. Then you have the middle box that held the ark. So it was like a 3-box structure, one nested in each other, is the wood. Wood is a reflection of our emotions, our feelings, our attitudes, which change every day. Sometimes we're angry, sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're moody, sometimes we're upset. All the different feelings that go through life. It's wood, it's pliable, it's moldable, it's changeable, but it's inside. Not always the people know if you're in a bad mood, which is why the outermost box is also gold. Because just because you're not in a good mood or you're having a hard time, it should not reflect in your external behavior or an external visage. Put on a happy face. Don't take it out on others. Your behavior should reflect your godly soul, not your moods, not your attitudes. I always tell my teachers in the first day of orientation, if you're having a hard day at home, something happened, put it all into your suitcase. When you come into the class, leave the suitcase outside. Don't worry. When you leave school, your suitcase will be waiting for you. You could pick it up and open it up then. In other words, don't show your students a sad, unhappy, miserable face or attitude because, yes, you had a tough time. Something's going on in your life. Put it away. It'll be there when you get out of class. So that's why you have the gold inside, reflecting the godly soul can never be touched. It's solid, rock solid, no matter how deep it's buried. Then you have behavior, which is malleable every day. We have different moods, and rightfully so, we're human. And then you have the outer box, the gold box again. You always have to reflect godliness, royalty, serenity. How you present yourself is very important. Don't let your inner emotions and attitudes and feelings of the day, don't let it reflect onto the world, onto others, because that creates a negative energy, not only for you, for others. So that's the reason that we have the 3 boxes holding the ark, holding the luchos, the 10 commandments, and the Torah scrolls were also in that box. So now let's go to our homes. Let's start off with the menorah. Where is the menorah in your home? Who knows? Where would you put the concept of the menorah? And what is the menorah in our home? Anybody have an idea? Think of light.
Usually put
Shabbos
in the
candles?
window. In the window. In the window.
In the window, you put the menorah. Someone said Shabbos candles. But in the scheme of like the feng shui, what we call, menorah means light. What's light? Knowledge, wisdom. The Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke that every home has to be bayis malei svarim. Every home has to have holy Jewish books. So one woman says to me, she called me a long time ago. She's afraid I have no Jewish books in my house. What should I get? I'm like, start with the basics. Prayer book, Psalms, the 5 books of the Torah. Start with the basics. Then you'll add a Tanya, which is the book of Kabbalah of the Alter Rebbe. You'll add books on law. But it's important to have a bayis malei Jewish books, holy books. Okay? I mean, it's good you can have self-help books, but that's not considered holy books. Holy books are books written by our sages, Torah books, scholarly books, whether they're Hebrew, English, it doesn't matter, but it's important to have holy books. So every Jewish home has to have a bookcase with Jewish holy books. And people walk in, they see that it's a house where Jewish knowledge and learning is valued. So that's one thing of having a Jewish tabernacle, making your home and yourself a Jewish sanctuary, a sanctuary for God. Now let's talk about the altar, where they brought the offerings. It says, Shulchan doimel mizbeach. An altar in Hebrew is a mizbeach. A table is compared to a mizbeach. So that's why you ever heard somebody say to the children, you're not allowed to jump on the table. Don't put dirty socks on the table. Don't put unclean stuff on the table. Why? Because shulchan doimel mizbeach. Your table, your dining room or kitchen table is considered like an altar. You make a blessing on food when you sit at the table. You might light your Shabbos candles at that table. That might be your Shabbos table with your beautiful white tablecloth. A table is considered a holy place. And that's why we have to treat it as such. So you see, like in Yiddishkeit and Judaism, everything in your life has a spiritual energy. A table is not a table anymore now. Now a table, you're going to look at it and say, wow, my table, something special. It's like an altar. It is. It is. So that's the shulchan. So we did the menorah shulchan, and then, of course, the loaves of bread. It's a mitzvah. And one of the special mitzvahs given to the woman to bake challah and to take off a piece of the dough before you bake and burn it in the oven to remind us of the offerings that were burnt on the altar. Some parts were eaten by the Kohen, some were completely burnt into ashes, given the fire came down from heaven. That was the offering to God. So that's why we take off a piece of challah to remind us of those offerings given to Almighty God. And also to realize that, everything comes from God. So we're giving back in a sense. So those are the challahs. A key or a sink. It's interesting when you wash your hands for the morning and you wash your hands after using the restroom, or you wash your hands before eating bread, you do it in a kitchen sink, not in a bathroom sink. Why not in a bathroom sink? Because bathroom is not a holy place. It's in a sense, an impure place. So when you do the spiritual washings, you do them in the kitchen sink, or, some beautiful homes. Some of my friends have a special, they call it a washing sink, near their dining rooms. So when everyone washes for challah, before dinner, before Shabbos meal, they have like that special, beautiful sink in the hallway or in the butler's pantry. So that's a beautiful thing. So you begin looking at your home as a mini sanctuary. That's why also we have a mezuzah on every door except the bathroom. You know, my husband was recently called. A family bought a mansion in Weston, and I think he hung maybe 30 mezuzahs, maybe 40. The house was huge. There was the garage, there was the attic, there was the butler's entrance, the maid's entrance, the bedrooms. It was beautiful. Every door, a mezuzah. Again, a mezuzah has the Shema Yisrael on it, and it's a protection for the family and for the home, even when you're not home. So that's another part of making your home a sanctuary for Hashem. Does anybody want to add anything that they could think of that you have in your home that you could say, this is how I'm making my home a sanctuary? Anybody want to add? Unmute yourself if you, because some women are muted. Does anybody want to add anything to the Jewish feng shui? So also, you know, like I spoke about this once before in the bedroom. A lot of people, they put their beds not to face the door of the bedroom. Why? Because when someone passes away, you carry them out feet first. So you don't want to draw attention to the laws of funeral and bereavement and death. So possible your beds don't face, or your bed doesn't face the doorway. But in some beds, it's impossible. There's no other way. Your beds have to face the doorway. That's another little tidbit with Jewish feng shui, so to speak. So let's bring everything together. Basically, what we're saying here is that not only was there detail-oriented to the last detail of how to build the sanctuary in the desert, but even in our own lives, the details in Yiddishkeit and Judaism matter of how we run our lives, how we live our lives. When you walk into a home, it should reflect a sanctuary, a place where godliness is felt, where light is felt, where goodness is felt, where kindness is felt, where there's harmony and love and mutual respect. So Asali Mikdash V'Shachanti B'Seichem, to conclude, God says, make me a tabernacle and I will dwell within them, within you, within your home. Because where you are is where godliness is found, if you let it in, of course. So I think there's a lot to think about. And each one of us has to be that cedar tree, a tree of strength, of hope for others, that the world will be a better place, and that we should see finally, the complete and final redemption. I want to wish everybody, amen. I want to wish everybody a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos.